Hello, everyone, and welcome to No Off Season, presented by MassMutual. I'm Zena Cada.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Ben Pickman.
Today on the show, it is time to ask some big questions about what might happen in the Eastern Conference of the WNBA this season. And we're talking about, will the Liberty repeat? We know that's hard to do. What is the ceiling for Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever? A little bit refurbished Indiana Fever, of course. And which team's young players are poised to step up and make a difference? But first, it is official. We have talked about this ad nauseum. Malaysia Fulwiley is officially headed to LSU. You can read more about all of the transfer portal winners and losers. Chantel's story is live on the site right now. And Ben, you've got a newser as well about what happened there and where she landed, etc. Get our thoughts over there. And please leave our comments. We want to know, how do you think Malaysia is going to fit into LSU? Lots of scoring will be happening down in the Bayou. Okay, Ben, you just literally walked in the door from a day at training camp with the New York Liberty, the reigning champions. Want to know, what was the vibe? What was it? Was it given championship? Let's repeat? What can you share with us from your experience there?
Yeah, it's always definitely a big adjustment to go from the end of a WNBA season and the intensity of a postseason to training camp a few months later. And you see a lot of new faces kind of packed into a gym because unlike when the regular season begins, training camp rosters, most teams around the league have around 18 players who are currently in camp. And so that is far more than the 11 or 12 that you get, once the season actually begins. So you have a lot of rookies who are trying to make the team and or just trying to impress, right? A team like New York, for instance, a lot of spots are already really accounted for. There's really only one, maybe two spots that are even up for grabs. And so it's a lot of players who are trying to make good impressions with the coaches, trying to make good impressions with teammates. It's just a lot of kind of new. And through 2 days of Liberty training camp, one of the things that you also feel is like first day of school energy, right? And I guess that's not something that is only true to New York. You see a lot of social teams around the league posting those kind of classic like school board, pictures that you see families and kids take when they're going to like first grade, second grade, third grade. You see that around the WNBA with players of all ages and experience levels. And it does really give off that vibe. Though we should note that some players, and frankly, a good amount of them, showed up last week or reported to their respective teams last week or the week before or even before that. So there's kind of a trickle in from players getting back into market in the weeks leading up to Sunday, April 27th. And then once April 27th happens, it's kind of the first official day of training camp, full speed ahead. And the energy kind of reflects that both in New York and some other teams more broadly.
Yeah, you talk about those social posts. I've been looking across the league, and it's so the energy, the bubbliness of all the players, they're just excited. And also I think it's a mix of seeing your old teammates, of course, if you were on the team last year, but now the possibility of a new season and getting going. And then you make a really great point about making sure that you're making a good impression, because whether or not you make a roster, those 10-day hardships, those opportunities to get called up, if something happens to a player, this is where you can cement your ability to come in and impact a team. Now, Sabreena, I'm imagining that the vibes are going to be a little different at a New York Liberty training camp where that team is pretty solid. They're returning most of their players versus some of these other teams that have a lot of new faces in the mix and are trying to, figure out what their new group is going to be. Where are you going to be headed? And what do you think are some of the other training camps are going to look like in comparison?
Yeah, so I'm in Chicago right now. I'll be at Sky training camp later this week. And then when I get back home to LA, I'll be at Sparks training camp. Two very different situations, obviously, than the New York
Right.
Liberty. Neither of these teams even made the playoffs last year, let alone coming off of a championship. So a lot more fresh start than, recreating the vibes of what happened the year before. But I just wanted to hit back to what you said about, making a good impression, even if you're not making the opening night roster. It is so important to remember that this is a season where we do have Eurobasket during the middle of the year, and a lot of players will be going back to Europe during June to compete for their national teams. So you look at a team like the New York Liberty, where Leo Fibic, Marine Johannes, Niar Sabali, Jonquil Jones will probably be competing for Eurobasket. So that leaves a lot of openings in the middle of the season for players, to stick for those relief player contracts, those hardship contracts. And you never know what's going to happen after that, right? Like if you make a good impression during that time, contracts aren't guaranteed until after that date in the WNBA. So you could theoretically bump somebody else out of their spot, later down the line. So with such a small league, it's really important that you make good contacts, good networking connections with like everybody who's around, because there's only 13 GMs that control your fate around the entire league. And if you can get an in with one, like they'll put in a good word for you somewhere else. So that's just something that I wanted to highlight first. But, as far as like the different, situations in camp, like I think you look at a team like Los Angeles and they have 18, 18 committed players coming to camp, right? And you look at a team like Atlanta, who has slightly fewer, and some people even have more than 18 that are signed to their training camp roster because a few of them are going to kind of come late. So a lot of teams approach this differently. Like some of them know who's going to make the roster and they're just trying to get everybody on the same page heading into the WNBA season. And some literally don't know who are going to fill slots 10, 11, and 12. And so this is legitimately a competition to see, okay, who do we like the best, who fits best with our core? And everyone sort of has a different way of approaching these 2 weeks before the start of the season.
What I'm excited to see for the first time is going to be the Valkyries. I will find a way to their training camp sometime this season in the midst of also the Warriors NBA playoffs, which I'm covering too. So it's going to be crazy, but I'm very excited because that is, if there's any team that exemplifies we don't know what's going to happen, it is that team for sure. So I'll keep you guys posted on what I see there. But let's take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and dive into the Eastern Conference, which, let's just be real, in the WNBA, the league is so small. Like when you think Eastern Conference, you barely think about it that way throughout the season. But this is a nice, easy way for us to organize our thoughts. And I think that we want to start with the team, Ben, that you just visited. These are the last year champions, the New York Liberty. Everyone knows the only question really surrounding this team is, can they repeat as champions? From that perspective, what are your thoughts, Ben?
I mean, it's been a question that I've probably heard asked in different forms a half dozen times, different ways through the first 2 days of training camp, Zena. And, I think first and foremost, New York hasn't run from acknowledging that, like, this is a really tough task in front of them. And that, this is, again, very tough to do. And that is the goal in front of them. They are not running from that at all. The thing that I think I've taken note of through the first 2 days is the different energy around the team this year. Is while the core of, Sabreena Ionescu, Jonquil Jones, and Breanna Stewart, that three in particular, is intact now for the third straight season. There are some changes on the edges, and the big change comes in the form of Natasha Cloud, who is going to play a big role for the New York Liberty. And, Cloud said as much on Sunday, like, you can see her on the court and you can also hear her, and you can hear her everywhere. And when she said something along those lines, she made sure to kind of let out a scream in the Barclays Center, in the practice gym where New York was working out. Like, she has such presence on and off the floor that so often with a championship team, when you think about that second year, they talk about like the need to keep things fresh and inject new energy. But Cloud does that as well as, I got to imagine, any kind of new player feeding into a championship roster. Like, she is someone who, again, like, very experienced in the league, a really, really good point guard, a all-W defender, and she's joining this new team that wants to repeat, and she just brings a ton of energy. And I think, like, that is the kind of player that will help to inject a ton of new life in New York. So just when we think about energy and the chances of repeating and not being stale, like, I think she has already helped with that, and she will continue to do so as the regular season progresses and we eventually get to the postseason too.
I'm so happy you brought that up, because when you think about Natasha Cloud's presence, and particularly, it's not going to be a one-on-one replacement, but think about who's not there and how they played, and that's Betnijah Laney-Hamilton. So thinking about the fact that Betnijah Laney-Hamilton may not be available to play as she is nursing that knee injury, that's a different look on their perimeter in terms of their defense, in terms of their leadership. I'm looking at that might be a different hurdle for them to overcome in terms of who they were as a core and having to shift and morph into something new. But what are some other hurdles that New York may face as they try to repeat this year, Sabreena?
Well, I mean, I think we've talked about this so much in the WNBA, how hard it is to repeat. The Las Vegas Aces are the only team that's done it in the last 20 years. Uh, you kind of need the new energy. I'm glad Ben brought that up. Like, Vegas made that so clear that it was so important for them to bring in, Alicia Clark in 2023 for that repeat bid, or what they tried to do with Tiffany Hayes in 2024. It just, things get a little stale if you have the same team over and over again. So having a little bit of new life, just different vibes, it all helps to just change the energy around the team, right? I keep wanting to say vibe. I'm really sorry about that. It just helps to change the energy.
It's
around
real.
the team.
It's real.
Yeah. And I think for Natasha Cloud, it's particularly interesting to me because she was on a team in 2019 that won a title with the Washington Mystics. They never really had a chance to repeat. She opted out of the bubble the next year. By the time she comes back, it's an entirely different team. And so you think about her understanding like the gravity of wanting to repeat. Like, she never got to go through that opportunity, but I'm sure it is significant for her too, to be part of this title chase in a way that maybe her other teammates are going through for the first time as well. So I think that's kind of cool that she gets this chance with the Liberty, if not the Mystics, considering that Mystics team just never got a second go round. But that forward situation is really interesting with the Liberty because it's not just Benijah Linney Hamilton. It's also Kayla Thornton, who was, taken in the expansion draft by the Golden State Valkyries.
Yep.
And they have Rebecca Gardner coming in. They have Natasha Cloud coming in. Both of those players I'd say are more two-guard, perimeter guard defenders than they are forwards in the way that Lainey Hamilton and Kayla Thornton were. They do have Kennedy Burke, who was on the team last year, who I assume is going to take on a slightly bigger role this season. But Lainey Hamilton and Thornton are just so solid. You knew exactly what you were going to get out of them. And it gave the Liberty a really big physical identity that, as much as I trust the defensive prowess of a Natasha Cloud, of a Rebecca Gardner, they're just very different kinds of players than the ones that they are theoretically replacing. So there's just kind of this like middle combo forward player that I'm wondering like who steps into that void for New York.
Yeah, those two were very much imposers on defense and the way that they play defense. And it was tough to get around them, very much frustration. Ben, what are you thinking about? Like, who's posing a threat? What are some of the hurdles that New York has to get over or people they have to get through?
Well, can I just say first, to fill the void, I mean, there's a player we haven't mentioned, and that's Leonie Fibich, right? She is the void filler for New York right now.
I think of her more as a guard defender than a forward defender. I could be wrong, but yeah.
I mean, I think they're going to play her. I mean, I think she's going to have to be that Swiss Army knife player. Like, she is,
for sure.
6'4", and we saw in the postseason what she can kind of do in terms of, guarding smaller players and guarding bigger players. And, Cloud also replaces the void left by Courtney Vandersloot, who, had been such a staple for the last 2 years and then kind of moved to the bench. In terms of, to your question of like, who are the players or the teams rather that are, pose a threat? I mean, top line, it's the Indiana Fever. We should say, though, and we should make this very clear, conference seeding or conference structure does not matter in the WNBA postseason the way it does in the NBA playoffs, right? And so when we're looking at conferences and conference champions, that's particularly important as it relates to the Commissioner's Cup, which is the WNBA's kind of in-season tournament. It actually has been going on longer than the NBA's in-season tournament for all those who are kind of new to the league. And so conference play matters then, but as it relates to total title contenders, New York is looking at, the Indiana Fever are, I think, the next best team in the Eastern Conference, but we could have a finals come October with 2 Western Conference teams, and that is totally that is totally okay.
Well, I'm happy you brought up Indiana because, I would say that this is the team that poses the biggest threat. This is a team that not only had an unbelievably dynamic backcourt with Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, 2 All-Stars last year. They also had a solid front court. Of course, Leah Boston just consistently being good since she entered the league. They lost some size inside, of course. No Melissa Smith anymore. No Temi Fagbenle. But they brought in some size as well, not only inside, but also particularly on the perimeter. I'm thinking about DeWanna Bonner. And they have a new coach as well. So they beefed up. They refurbished. They're looking shiny. They're looking new. And they're coming in, adding in DeWanna Bonner, Natasha Howard, Sophie Cunningham, and Sydney Colson. So let's start with the head of the snake for Indiana. This is Caitlin Clark. What is the ceiling for her? And then particularly for her and the impact she can have on the Fever to elevate them towards the top of this conference and the league.
I mean, we're talking about a player that was already first team All-W last season and in top 5 of WNBA MVP voting. So for her, I think Clark being in the MVP conversation is kind of the baseline at this point. You know, she's already been that good as a rookie, and I imagine she's going to take another step forward. I mean, we talked about how that Olympic break was so good for her to get some rest and come in with her legs underneath her. Now she has an actual off season, that she got to take off where, she didn't play in Unrivaled, she didn't play overseas. So this is a lot of time for Caitlin to just get her body right and come in the best shape possible for this upcoming season. And I think that's going to pay huge dividends for her. Like there's no like ramping up period this time around for Caitlin Clark. She's going to come in on game 1 and be already one of the top 5 players in the WNBA. So I mean, I think MVP has to be like the ceiling for her, right? Like she's already in that conversation. So for her to, get even higher in the vote total, potentially winning that award either this year or next is what I would expect from her.
Yeah, I'd be on the same page there. And like, Ben, I'm thinking you got MVP caliber play in your point guard. That kind of sets the tone for everything else you're doing on the court. And now you look at all these pretty tools that Indiana has equipped Caitlin with, on top of what she already had in Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston. I mean, you've got DeWanna Bonner coming up the floor in the trail on the wing, being able to knock down shots. You got Natasha Howard that can bang inside. Sophie Cunningham, of course, another outside shooter. This is fun. This is fun. You're going to be able to see this team kind of play in a completely different way than you even saw last year. How far could they go with all of these new tools under their belt?
You mentioned all the new that the Indiana Fever have roster-wise, Zena, and we should say that they only have 5 returning players from last year's team on this year's roster, and that is only part of what is new around the Indiana Fever. You mentioned a new head coach in Stephanie White. You have 2 new top basketball decision makers in Amber Cox and Kelly Krauskopf. You have new assistants. You have a new PR person. You have more new support staff, new player development coach. Like, there is so much new around this team. And the Indiana Fever, mind you, have not had a winning season since 2015. They have not even been out of the first round since then, right? So while it is fair that Caitlin Clark has MVP expectations, and it wouldn't be totally shocking for them to win a championship this year, the kind of like adage of you have to go through growing pains together and kind of, go build scar tissue up before you can get over the hump. Like that would seem to apply to the Indiana Fever this year. And if we just go down a little bit of WNBA history, recent WNBA history, that's kind of what we've seen. Like the number 1 pick doesn't necessarily just win a championship in the following year, especially if that number 1 pick is the best player on the team, right? So the Aces in 2019, they ended up making the 2020 finals. They lost that year. Jackie Young, technically the number 1 pick in 2019, but that year's kind of an outlier because Asia Wilson was, again, the number 1 pick before that, and she made the leap that year to get them to the finals. And again, they lost. If you look at the Seattle Storm in 2018, they won the title. That's, I guess, in Stewie's 3rd season, not her 2nd. So that would put the Indiana Fever on pace to win it next year. The Phoenix Mercury, they ended up winning the 2014 title. They had picked Brittany Griner number 1 the year earlier, but again, the Phoenix Mercury also had Diana Taurasi, an all-time great, kind of leading the way on that team. And they had a very veteran team beyond just Brittany Griner. One of the big exceptions, and maybe it isn't even a full exception, maybe Sabreena will correct me, is the 2011 Minnesota Lynx. They had the number 1 pick. They took Maya Moore and won the title the same year. But again, that 2011 team is full of all-time greats. So
I was just going to say they were stacked too.
History, exactly. Like a little bit of history would say it wouldn't be shocking if the Fever made the finals. They even could win it. But if you want to look at past precedent here, like maybe not the year. Make them a bet for next year's title is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah. Also, for visual purposes, Ben's camera is overheating, so we apologize for the discrepancy there, but he still looks great regardless of the camera that's on him. So let's keep pushing, folks. Literally, I love the history lesson. I love history. I think if you really just want to go back 1 year, like look at the New York Liberty. They needed to go through a run after amassing unbelievable talent in Brianna Stewart and Jonquel Jones and Courtney Vandersloot. You would have thought, oh, boom, bam, let's go. championship rings, get them sized. But no, they needed to go on a run against the Aces, who had also gone through their growing pains. So it is very normal to imagine that Indiana may need a little bit of time to get to the promised land. Okay, we get back on the second break. We're going to talk about the rest of the Eastern Conference. For now, we've got to go into the rest of the Eastern Conference because there's going to be some more teams with a lot of young talent looking to disrupt the path to a repeat for the Liberty and a first time for the Indiana Fever. And I'm talking about the Chicago Sky, the Atlanta Dream, the Washington Mystics. And I want to know, Ben, Sabreena, out of these teams, which team do you think stands to put up the best fight against New York and Indiana? And I forgot Connecticut as well. What am I thinking?
Well, if we're just talking about this season, I think Atlanta is the pretty clear answer. They have multi-time All-Stars in Ryan Howard, Brittany Griner, Bree Jones. Alicia Gray, I don't believe is a multi-time All-Star. Could be wrong there, but
this was her first year was her last year. Yeah.
Very talented roster. So if we're talking about just the 2025 season, I think that is the team just with their overall level of talent. What I hope is going to be a more maximized offense with Carl Semesko running the show. And then Jordan Canada at the helm at point guard. I think that's a group that has a good amount of defensive intensity to really get into teams like New York and Indiana, But if we're talking about going forward, like in terms of who I think is going to potentially challenge for a title alongside one of those two teams in, the near future, I'm not sure that the Dream would be my pick.
Okay, interesting. And I think that's true. I think there's a lot of veterans within Atlanta. And you think about the fact that Atlanta was making the playoffs. They just couldn't get past that first round hump with that talent that they had. And they've bolstered up, particularly in size. And so that will be very interesting on how that plays out. Now, thinking about a team with size, Chicago had that handled with Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso. But now you're looking at some of the veteran players they've brought in on the perimeter. I'm particularly thinking of Courtney Vandersloot coming back to her Sky team and, maybe wanting to bring another opportunity for the playoffs and maybe a ring again. Ben, looking at Chicago, Washington, Connecticut, any of these teams who's closest to winning a title next, in your opinion?
Again, I agree. I think Atlanta is my answer both in the present and in the future because they still have some young talent in Ryan Howard, who, we should have mentioned, I guess, in the intriguing episode. She's one of the players I have spotlighted for how does Unrivaled help her. She was one of the best defensive players, in my opinion, during the Unrivaled first league experience, and she made, Unrivaled all second team. So I'm interested to see what jump she makes from that to this. On Chicago, they're really, really interesting because, they didn't make the playoffs last year, but they have a pretty veteran team, right? They have Beck Allen. They have Ariel Atkins. They have added Kia Nurse. Courtney Vandersloot they brought back. A lot of that core, it's not just first and second year players, whereas Washington, the core of their team really does seem to be in a developmental phase. And I think Connecticut, though their roster has some variety in terms of, someone like Tina Charles on one end and plenty of rookies on the other, Connecticut to me still feels a long way from legitimately competing. Chicago seems to have aspirations not only to get back into the playoffs, but kind of not fully bottom out. They never really did. And so, yeah, you have Reese and Cardozo kind of as young player pillars of what they're doing. But around those younger players, they have a lot of experience, and a lot of those players, again, will hit free agency. And so, when we look at a team that they clearly want to be competitive, like that is very clear because I think they want to say, well, yeah, we have good young players, and if you come here, then we're going to take that next step. And that is, a sign that they're signaling to vets right now and also in the future. So they're certainly a team to spotlight. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm not betting it, I guess, but it certainly could. It's definitely an interesting approach that Jeff Pagliacca and that front office are taking.
Yeah, and I'm happy you brought up those two particular additions in Ariel Atkins and Kia Nurse because Ariel Atkins had been holding it down in Washington for a while and a little bit on her own in the midst of injuries and different movements that were happening with the Mystics. And then Kia Nurse, same thing, she only had one season with Los Angeles, but she was also a key leader and veteran on that team. And I'm just like thinking about those two coming in and kind of finally wanting to make an impact and be able to have a little bit more depth into the playoffs than they've had in recent years. So yeah, I'm happy you brought those two up because I almost forgot about how impactful they could potentially be as well. Now, we've talked about on previous shows, all three of these teams, particularly the Washington Mystics, Connecticut, you can add Atlanta, Chicago as well with the young core. If you're a GM, and we're not talking about just this upcoming season, but you're a GM and you're looking at a young core, young key players, who would you want on your team? Like, which of these teams, as a GM, you're like, ooh, I have quite the foundation?
Yeah, I think this is probably like an unpopular answer, but I would want Washington. I look at the teams that we're talking about, and I'm not sure that I see a singular player where I am positive that they can be the number one option on my title-winning team. And if I don't have that player yet, then I'm going to need to get that through the draft. And Washington is the only team here that really seems positioned to actually take advantage of the draft in the upcoming seasons. Like, Washington is the only team this year that's really trying to rebuild. They have made it very obvious with their trade of Ariel Atkins, their trade of Carly Samuelson, not signing a single external free agent, right? This is a team that is trying to develop internally and, build through the draft, which is what their counterpart, the Washington Wizards, are doing in the NBA too. It's very much an organizational mandate. So I see a team that is poised to take advantage of the 2026 draft, that is poised to take advantage of the 2027 draft, which could be, the Juju Watkins, Madison Booker, Hidalgo draft. They have the opportunity to swap picks with Chicago in that draft too, if things go hokey in the lottery or, things don't work out for the Sky. So I just look at a team that's giving itself more bites at the apple. I already really like Aaliyah Edwards and Shakira Austin, as foundational frontcourt pieces in Washington. So to me, like, it's not to say that I don't like the players on Chicago or Atlanta or Connecticut.
Sure.
It's just I'm not sure that I see like the Caitlin Clark or, like a Brianna Stewart or Krista Collier that could be that best player. And if you don't have it, you got to get it. And the Mystics seem best positioned to do that.
Yeah, I like that Mystics pick too because of the variety you get in the young core they already have. And then on top of being able to get draft assets, you've got size, you've got guard play, you've got a ball handler already developing in Washington, particularly with the additions they made this year with Sonia Citron, Georgia Amore, and Kiki Iriafen. And so you're seeing the whole team being built out from all different positions, as opposed to some teams being heavier on the guard side or some teams being heavier on the size side, particularly looking at Chicago. Ben, when you're thinking about which team feels more equipped to set themselves up for success in the future, maybe not this season, but in the future, which team's young core excites you the most?
Again, Sabreena said it's not the popular opinion, but Sabreena, it's popular with me because I also think it is the Washington Mystics. And I think it is for that same reason that I just want to drill down on. Like, they're one of the only teams in the league, if not the only team right now, that really does seem like they are trying to build fully for the future. Like, they are trying to, I know, we talk about it, Dallas, they're talking about being, foundational habits. That's true. But like, if the Dallas Wings made the playoffs and pushed a team in the postseason, like, that wouldn't be totally shocking. Whereas, like, it would be in the case of the Washington Mystics. Like, that is a team that I think knows where they are in the pecking order of the WNBA and is realistic about expectations in a way that not every franchise is. So you can either be a person who kind of loves hope and loves the kind of what if, as Sabreena outlined very well, or I think that other like team is Chicago. And if you think that Reese and Cardozo will both continue to be multi-time All-Stars and that even without kind of having a ton of draft capital and without having, at least in the present, a facility that historically matches up with others around the league and has kind of been a little bit more, has dealt with more instability compared to some other franchises, like maybe if they get take another step forward this year, they put themselves in a good position for free agency. As I said, going forward, like you can kind of make the case, and that's the argument, that they're not going to build through the draft. They're going to build through Reese and Cardozo. We'll see what Haley Van Lith brings. And then they're going to just try and like get vets around them. And that's the other approach that they are clearly taking. I'm not convinced it's going to lead them to be a legitimate title contender, but and as a result, like I'm kind of saying, play the long game like Sabreena and go the hope route. But those are, I think, the two doors that you're deciding between of those three.
Well, the saying goes, patience is a virtue. And I think that that's what Washington is trying to play into right now. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up a little bit more rapid fire style, looking at the entire Eastern Conference. 1, which free agent signing will be the most impactful?
The free agent signing that I think is going to be the most impactful is Bree Jones in Atlanta. I think she's just been a heavily underrated player throughout her career in Connecticut, just because of the variety of roles she's had to assume behind Jonquel Jones, Liz Thomas, starting, coming off the bench. She's just, by definition, one of the very most effective players in the WNBA, has been over the last 4 years, excluding the one season that she missed with her Achilles injury. But, for a team that had a lot of difficulty scoring the ball well, like Bree Jones just does that at a very high level, night in and night out. So that's, I think, can be the most impactful free agency acquisition in the East.
I like it. Solid player inside. And yes, quiet confidence to her game. You can always count on her. It's not going to be super loud, but this could be an opportunity for her to kind of break out. Ben, free agent signing, most impactful.
Okay, if I'm sticking to the question, and I'll throw a player in that we haven't said, it's Tina Charles.
Of course you are going to set up if I'm sticking to the question.
Tina Charles is an acceptable answer here. We have not said the Connecticut Sun, I don't expect to be a very good compared to some of the teams in the top of the conference, but she's going to get a lot of opportunity, and I would bet that it is I would say it is a safe bet that 5 years down the road, if the Sun have kind of built with this core of Rivers and Morrow, that a lot of them also, reflect on that 1 year or however long it is with Tina Charles and talk about what they've learned from her. So I think there's both an on-court impact and also a being a professional impact that she brings. But if I was going to cheat the question, I would say Natasha Cloud, who was again acquired via trade to the New York Liberty. So not a free agent acquisition, but we've already covered that. I think she'll have a big impact on New York.
Okay, I like that. Let's keep it going. Which new regime? Which new regime? That is a French word, so it just seems really weird to say it in English. Which new regime, GM, front office, coaching, are you guys most interested in seeing? Ben, you first.
For me, it's the Indiana Fever. And again, we're going to go deeper on them, but they made the coaching change that they did because they want to compete for a championship this year. The expectations are high. There is a lot of new. It is Stephanie White who is returning to the Indiana Fever, having played for them back in the day, having been their head coach, having also been an assistant there. She's bringing someone in like Bree January, one of her top assistants, who, again, one of the best players in the franchise's history as a player, now returning as an assistant coach. We talked about the expectations. I'm just really curious to see what adjustments they make as a staff. And, obviously there's a lot new, as we said, and we're going to see what happens. So that is my answer.
There you go. Okay. Sabreena, what about you?
For me, it's Washington. I alluded to why their upcoming future is particularly interesting to me because of all of the different directions it could go. But, you mentioned, Zena, patience is a virtue. And it's one thing to say that you want to rebuild through the draft. And it's another thing to go through a season where you're 9-35 and all of a sudden you really want to tack some wins on the next year. And do you have the stomach for a long rebuild? I'm not entirely sure. So I'm curious if they actually are going to go through with this plan, if they have the gall to just wait it out and actually wait out some draft picks. And then they have a new head coach too in Sydney Johnson, who I think most WNBA fans are pretty unfamiliar with. His most recent women's basketball experience is with USA with 3-on-3. So he's been able to coach Brittany Sykes in that capacity, but I don't really know what he's like as a basketball mind. So just how he's able to develop a very, very deep crew of young players is one of the most important questions that's going to decide, the Mystics' future from here on out.
Okay. let's keep it rolling. First time All-Star in the Eastern Conference. Sabreena?
I think I'm going for a clean sweep here. Shakira Austin is going to be my first time All-Star.
Wow, look at that. Okay. There you
I'm
go.
all in on whatever's happening in the nation's
In
capital.
Washington.
But she has been kind of injury prone the last couple of years, but I think we saw with Lunar Owls and Unrivaled, when Shakira Austin's on the floor, she is very impactful. She's a dynamite defensive player. She has more in her bag offensively in terms of creating from the top of the key. She's going to get so many touches on this mixed six roster just with the type of crew that they've assembled. And I think she'll be able to put up a lot of counting stats. I know it's harder to get onto the All-Star team coming from a team with a losing record, but I do believe if she is just head and shoulders above what everybody else on the Mystics is doing, and she's able to have like high-profile performances going up against like a Brianna Stewart or, Brittany Griner in Atlanta, if she can have a couple of those games to just highlight, I think it's going to be a good start to the season at the very least for Shakira Austin.
I like it. Ben?
I like that call by Sabreena, and I think I'm going to use very similar logic in the pick I have, and that is Marina Mabry of the Connecticut Sun. Because, again, while the Sun might not be a very good team, someone is going to have to score the basketball, and she's going to have the basketball in her hand a lot, and she is going to score a lot of points and take a lot of shots and find teammates for assists. And so Marina has put herself in position, I think, to in the conversation for all-star teams in past seasons. There have been years in which, I know people have either voted for her or given her heavy consideration of voting. She's bounced around a few teams and again, after the trade request, like she is here still with the Connecticut Sun entering this season. And so I think she's well positioned to fill up the box score. And a lot is just going to have to run through her as an offensive creator. So, someone who is, again, knocked on the door of an all-star team in the past and never gotten there. And maybe with Connecticut, even if they're, again, not one of the league's best teams, she finally gets the nod.
That trade request is exactly why I didn't put Marina Mabry on my list, because I just have no idea where she's going to end up by the time those all-star teams come out.
There. That's a great point. Okay, I'll round up. Free agent signing for me, most impactful. I think DeWanna Bonner is going to have something to say about trying to close out her career on a top note, especially playing alongside Caitlin Clark. Which new regime? I'm actually interested in Chicago. Tyler Marsh got a lot of new talent in his front office. I'm excited to see what happens. We know that that's been a little bit unstable up in Chicago. We'll see what happens in terms of bringing stability there. And first time All-Star, I don't think Natasha Cloud's been an All-Star, has she?
She has not. That is a very good choice.
Great
so
call.
I think that is going to be my first time All-Star for the Eastern Conference. All right, we got a new fun segment called Out of Context. Here's how it's going to work. Ben is going to give us a quote from someone in women's basketball. This time, it's going to be someone related to the WNBA. In future episodes, it could be Unrivaled, college, whatever. But right now, we are focusing on the W, specifically the Eastern Conference. And then Sabreena and we are going to guess who said it, where, and when, which is going to be incredibly difficult. So Ben, what do you have?
Yeah, I take some of these exercises way too seriously. So I'm gonna,
I expect
try to
four
do some
quotes to be coming my
some
way.
digging here. I have some honorable mentions, but I won't even throw them in. Here's the quote after some extensive research here. It is, quote, "I picked up golf a little bit, and I found out I was a lefty. I'm ambidextrous, and I continued to try to hit it righty, and I couldn't. So I flipped the club, and I hit it lefty. I can now hit the ball." Yeah, you would have thought a WNBA quote, I was going to give you a WNBA piece of context, but no.
Okay. Okay, Sabreena, the first thought, I'm thinking it's a Liberty player because he was just at Liberty camp, but he's been a little bit around. I know, he's been a little bit of everywhere.
Ben is always up on the WNBA Content Network just watching video from everything that happens around the country.
Yeah, right.
So I think golf, Ryan Howard and Alicia Gray, but they've already picked up golf.
Oh, right, because they've been
Alicia Gray knows she's a lefty, so I don't think she would need to learn that by playing golf.
Yeah, it has to be someone that is naturally right-handed. For some reason, I thought Natasha Cloud, but Natasha Cloud's a lefty, so never mind.
Let's see. Obviously, a lot of news with Caitlin picking up golf.
Yeah.
over the offseason.
Could
I
it-
can't
It's
imagine
not
she's a
Caitlin.
lefty.
It's definitely not
I was
Caitlin.
trying
That
to
is
throw you there a little bit. I was trying to
unreasonable
throw you there.
that she
Good
would
work,
be a
Sabrina.
lefty.
Yeah. Now, wait, question, Ben. Is this
Yeah.
a person from the Eastern Conference?
Yes, this is an Eastern Conference person.
I assumed it was Eastern Conference. This is our
Okay,
East
I just want to make
episode,
sure.
after all,
Right, of course. I didn't know. I mean, you never know. Ben's like, never know what he's throwing at us. I don't know. Dang, this is hard.
I picked up golf. Say that again, Ben. Can you read it once more?
Absolutely. I will do my best game show host and read it again with the same intonations. I picked up golf a little bit and I found out I was a lefty. I'm ambidextrous and I continued to try to hit it righty and I couldn't. And so I flipped the club and I hit it lefty. I can now hit the ball.
For some reason, I keep thinking Brianna Stewart. I feel like she would have this like very nonchalant way of being like, yeah, I tried this. I flipped the club. Turned out I could hit it. Like, I just feel like she would say
Her
this.
being able to do a lot of things just supremely easily is a very Stewie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like
Right?
casually discovering you're ambidextrous seems like a kind of thing that could happen to Brianna Stewart. Yeah, I got you.
And I just feel like, and she's probably like in training camp right now practicing her swing. Like, on
Okay, the
both
only
sides.
thing
I
is,
can
like,
see it.
Stewie has the finals run, right?
Mhm.
Is founding a league.
She has Unrivaled, right? Does she have time to pick up
and
golf?
then had knee surgery.
But she
When
was
is she
in
picking up
Florida.
golf?
That's true. Who was in Florida, right? You got to think about Miami Unrivaled.
It's true. I
That
think
could
Stewie
be
is a
it.
good call, just because of the ease of her discovering that she's ambidextrous. is
I
very funny.
know. Huh.
Yeah, why don't we get Stewie? I'm good with that.
Let's
But,
go
like,
Stewie.
When and where is that relevant here? I assume it would just have been
I don't know.
delivered to
Media
Ben at New York
day
Liberty
or
Training Camp.
Right. Yeah, something. Okay, we're gonna put our vote in is gonna be Stewie, that she is the one that has picked up golf. And yeah.
Your logic is correct in a lot of ways, but the pick is wrong. It's actually Sabrina Ionescu.
I knew it was gonna be that was gonna be my second guess.
Okay,
Ben.
but in terms of being busy, when in the world is Sabrina Ionescu taking up golf?
That is the question.
But what? Okay, so the reason why I had Sabrina also in my mind is because of Curry Brand, and Steph loves. Like, I mean, she's not with Curry Brand, of course, but
she's Nike. Yeah.
Steph and Sabrina have this connection, and he loves golf, and maybe like I don't know, through the ether of basketball and shooting and being really good at things that and
Well,
I don't know. I
at
just
least
feel
we
as
got
if
the when and where right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Damn.
I got to do some more reporting on when Sabrina Ionescu actually took up golf and when she had the time to do it. Also, she went on a big international tour with Nike this offseason. But I thought it was interesting that someone who, as you said, Sabrina, like super competitive, golf historically frustrates a lot of professional athletes because, again, like it's all about muscle memory, and that little white ball just stares right back at you and doesn't move. And Sabrina can hit, threes at crazy distances, but she couldn't hit a golf ball straight right-handed. And so I think it just speaks to like her competitive mindset. Also just kind of fun that, she flips a club around and can do it both ways. I will say, like, it's not totally unheard of for someone to write with one hand and play golf on the other side also. Not to compare myself to Sabrina Ionescu in any way, but I do write left-handed and I play golf righty, so I appreciate the kind of having
I'm
to do
the
things a little
opposite,
differently.
Ben.
There you go.
I write with my right hand and I play with my left. Mm-hmm.
And I will say, if you would like to know the Brianna Stewart fun fact that emerged from training camp, she went to pottery class a few weeks ago and she made a bowl.
Different.
So, yeah.
Not the same. Got it. Well, that was a great intro to Out of Context. Wow. We were so close. I promise you, if it wasn't Brianna, I was going to say Sabrina. Thank you, Ben. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate it. That is going to be it for today. Please join us on Friday when we travel to the other side for the Western Conference, where we'll talk through some of the biggest questions facing those teams. If you're new here, hit that follow button wherever you're listening so you can stay up to date with us. And of course, come find us on YouTube. Our faces are really pretty, even with the camera malfunction that we had with Ben. Leave comments wherever you're listening. We read them. And if you'd be so kind, please give us a rating. It really helps new people find the show, and I can shriek in their ears about how I almost got the right answer, but I didn't. So don't forget, as always, there's more to read and watch over our partner at the Yahoo Sports Hub. Check it out at sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. On behalf of The Athletic, I'm Zena Cada. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to No Off Season. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.